We are a nation that at this moment is governed by, reacting to, thinking about, talking about, and very likely being swayed to believe in someone or something that we would never before consider by the polls. Those innumerable, insufferable, and more often than not dead wrong numerical gatherings of what people are supposedly saying, how people will supposedly vote, and what they are allegedly thinking while being disturbed at dinner. Political polls. Noted author and humorist Irma Bombeck once uttered perhaps the most succinct and honest opinion on polling when she said, and I quote, "I haven't trusted polls since I read that 62% of women had affairs during their lunch hour. I've never met a woman in my life who would give up lunch for sex." Unquote. Should we believe the latest such polling that tells us Bernie Sanders would defeat Donald Trump and Democrats will hand the election to him if they nominate Hillary Clinton? We'll get there right after John Bachman sets the table. John?
Well, Ed, unless there is a real revolution in Philadelphia in July, Hillary Clinton is going to be the Democratic Party's nominee. But after primary victories in 20 states with 6 still left to go, and concerning new general election poll numbers, we'll have those in a second for the Clinton campaign, the question more and more Democrats are asking, is there really any way Bernie Sanders could still be a better option?
I hope by the end of this nominating process, we will win at least half or more of the states in our country.
Bernie Sanders and his supporters refusing to go away quietly. The fracas at the Nevada State Democratic Convention between Sanders and Clinton supporters has some worried about history repeating.
I don't want to go back to the '68 convention.
But instead of looking back with anger, Democrats should start looking to the future. Quote, "Bernie Sanders is the future of the Democratic Party," writes comedian and columnist Dean Obeidallah. The key to the Democratic Party winning in 2016 is Bernie Sanders. Sanders is also the key to Democrats retaking the U.S. Congress, as well as governorships and state legislatures. Obeidallah also pointing out that Sanders is winning significantly more voters under 30 than even Obama did in 2008. He also called out DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz, which has been happening a lot lately. Here's former Obama administration official Van Jones on CNN.
That is malpractice. I wish Reince Priebus was my party chair.
Here's Mika Brzezinski, if Joe Scarborough would just let her finish.
The debate process rigged Iowa, rigged the entire thing going.
And here's Sanders campaign manager Jeff Weaver.
It's been pretty clear, Steve, from almost from the get-go, that she has been working against Bernie Sanders.
My response to that is hashtag SMH.
Wasserman Schultz says she's trying to get Democrats focused on just one thing.
Do everything we can to make sure Donald Trump never becomes president of the United States.
But when 2 new polls show her party's nominee losing to Donald Trump, a lot of Democrats can't help but focus on the other guy still refusing to give up.
I don't deny for a moment that we have an uphill fight.
Now, hold on, Bernie Sanders supporters. It's important to mention that that same Fox News poll that had Trump ahead of Clinton shows Bernie Sanders beating Trump by just 4 points now. That's down 9 points from just last month. Also today, during an interview with CNN, Hillary Clinton sent a message to Bernie Sanders supporters, reminding them that this race is actually further apart than was the race between her and Barack Obama in 2008. She says she has more votes this time around, Ed, and she has more delegates.
The polls, the numbers.
It's a lot.
Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. John, thanks a lot. All right, now for those cherished words of wisdom that should educate and enrage. That's what the political animal is here for, naturally. If you have the courage to opine, you can line up at 1-877-Newsmax and await your turn. Should we open the verbal floodgates? Let's begin with informative discourse. Welcome back the National Review columnist, senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, Mona Charen, joined by senior writer for the Weekly Standard, Mark Hemingway. Thank you both for joining us. Let's get to it. Mark, I'm going to begin with you first time out. We've heard this argument before. Democrats, if you don't put Bernie Sanders in there, you are handing the election to Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton can't win. Impossible. It's dead in the water. But wait a minute here. I'm looking at polls right now that shows that they might be right. Bernie Sanders up CNN, Fox News, Quinnipiac, Public Policy, NBC Wall Street Journal. Hey, Mark, are they right?
Well, I think one thing we need to keep in mind here, which is that the polls have been spectacularly off especially in the 2014 electoral cycle and this cycle. One of the polls earlier in the Michigan primary, I think, was off by something like 27 points, where Bernie Sanders stunned everybody and won the Michigan primary. Now, that may look like it bodes well for Sanders, but at the same time, we just don't know. I mean, I don't really trust these polls. And secondarily, when you look at the polls, you also have to keep in mind mind that we don't live in a direct democracy. Just because the polls show a majority of people liking this or that, you have to look more at the electoral map and what that's going to do. And I have a hard time imagining that Sanders, his socialist economic program is going to go over well in states that maybe, tilt blue, but maybe more sort of Union Democrats or Reagan Democrats like Pennsylvania and Ohio. So it's just looking at polls doesn't tell us a whole lot.
Mona, I think that's fair. I mentioned that even in the lead in here. But hey, look, Bernie Sanders, people under 30, they love him. That's 17% of the total electorate right now. That's up from even 2012. Sanders is doing real well with the youth vote. Is there the possibility, or again, Mona, just bring us back to earth here. We got to realize these are numbers and it ain't even October yet.
Right. So, look, Bernie Sanders is the future of the Democratic Party if the Democratic Party wants to go in the direction of Venezuela. But he has won over the youth vote, and that's really thanks to Barack Obama, who has successfully moved the Democratic Party to the left during the course of his administration. So,
but
sorry,
no, that's okay. But when you put all that in there, it does bring us right back full circle to that argument we hear that Hillary Clinton, you're going to automatically hand this election to Donald Trump if you make her the Democratic nominee. Right. And that's just so foolish on so many levels.
There's one other thing to say about the Democratic Party, though, and that is that they are less small d Democrat than the Republican Party, really. I mean, they still have this system of superdelegates that helps to give the establishment candidate the advantage. You had the situation in Iowa where there were 6 coin tosses in a row that just happened to go for Hillary Clinton. It's funny that the Republican Party is actually more Democratic, again with a small d. They let the voters decide. And that I'm not saying that the Republicans are wise in this necessarily, but that is the way it is. The Democratic Party, the fix is in more, and Bernie Sanders does have a legitimate complaint about that, except that he knew what the rules were when he got into this, didn't he?
How dare you intimate the fix is in? How dare you, Mona? But then again, I love it when you dare and you go right out there when it comes down to fact. A couple of minutes we got here. Let's get 2 other quick things in here. The hashtag Never Trump movement that was there. CBS had a really good commentary today where they talked about why it failed, where basically they're talking about the Republicans lost control of the party. But it's maybe time, according to them, for professional conservatives to have a discussion about how they got to where they are today. Mark, let me begin with you then briefly. Why did this movement fail? Is it simply because of that? They had no idea where they were at in the first place and didn't pay attention to the land around them.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think there was a lot of Beltway elites and the Republican consultant class, which is just, full of grifters and all sorts of, people that I could say some bad things about, didn't see Donald Trump coming. And, this is a lesson for them. It may be a painful
Did they not
lesson
see him coming because of their own blindness, though? I mean, over decades?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think they were really comfortable in thinking that the traditional methods of going about raising money and winning elections was working, and that people out in the hinterlands weren't, that discontent with Washington. The reality is that they're furious and incredibly frustrated, and they just simply did not see that coming. I know it's good comeuppance, but the question is at what price?
There's a good point. Let me use that word, Mona. Is that just it? This is the comeuppance that these people who backed Never Trump should have been expecting for a long time. They just never thought it would really happen. They never thought the American people would rise up like this.
Perhaps. I think it was Eric Hoffer who said that in America, every movement eventually becomes a racket. And I think that was the case to a degree with the conservative movement. You had the rise of the so-called conservative media that lots of people became very wealthy by attacking their fellow Republicans. And so you never had, you never had the Republican voter hearing any good thing about the Republican Party. He certainly didn't hear it, or she, from the mainstream media. They were always identifying Republicans as the villains. And then they didn't hear it either from so-called conservative media, who are also identifying Republicans as the problem. And so I think that's a big part of the Trump phenomenon. Not all of it, but
right.
but definitely a factor.
But a lot of
was
it's all in your own house. Sometimes you got to look in your own house and see when things are happening because you don't blame everybody else. I only got 30 seconds left. Quick answer from both of you. Donald Trump sent out his list of 11 potential Supreme Court picks. Mona, 10 seconds. Do you think he knows who any of them are, or was this just a list handed to him?
Right. So, you would like to know who the person was who compiled the list, and maybe that person should run for president because, not a bad list. Whether Trump actually really means it, he himself seemed to undermine that narrative by saying he would consider these people, but he was making no promises.
10 seconds. Same question to you, Mark.
It's a good list, and it's encouraging that he put together such a good list. But at the same time, it ultimately means nothing because Trump's word has meant nothing time and time again in this election.
That's all you got to do. You got to know who's sitting on the list. And one guy, of course, tweeting out anti-Trump tweets in months prior doesn't really help things. Mark Hemingway, Mona Charen, thanks so much for joining us. We do appreciate your time. Has the time come to dispense with the international event that brings the world together every 4 years simply because everybody cheats and doesn't get caught? That and more when The Hard Line continues.